Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I will be targeting fall run steelhead today with salmon roe. Due to the salmon closure, roe had been extremely hard to come around nowadays, but I found a great source from a few guys up north whom still have an open salmon season in Oregon and Washington. Fall run steelhead is a great alternative to salmon fishing. Currently in our state of California, the salmon season is closed, but I will be using roe on ultralight gear today on a super short leader to avoid hooking salmon. I will be literally free lining the roe without no sinker or weight to get it close to the bottom, because I will use the natural weight of the roe to float it near the shallow riffle. I find that the salmon will occupy the holes beneath these riffles, whereas the steelhead will sit above on the headwaters. I will hook the roe onto the hook and then I will attach it with the egg loop knot. I have shown the egg loop knot on a previous tutorial video from last year, so if you guys need to see it, I have it on a playlist. As for the roe, I have it cured with a very basic salt, sugar, and borax cure. No flavoring because this particular river is very far inland, so I will not need any sort of flavoring. The biggest difference between fall run steelhead and winter run steelhead is the variety of bait fall run steelhead will take. I find that in the fall, the biggest steelhead will be taken with roe. Despite having a lot of salmon in the river that have not started spawning, these steelhead will begin to key in on roe because they seem to have a knack for knowing that the salmon will start spawning soon. I ended up hooking into this really nice fall run steelhead. I know this is a steelhead and not a salmon because the violent head shakes let me know right away that it is not a salmon. One topic I want to address on this channel as well is because the sheer number of anglers that had come onto this channel to ask me about regarding the salmon fishing. I personally fish according to the rules and regulations set by our state and local counties. As for the anglers that had declared themselves the sovereign citizens, I don't advocate that kind of fishing on this channel and never will I ever advocate that kind of fishing. I will always show my viewers and subscribers that I fish according to the laws and regulations set in place by said body of water, local, state, counties, and such. I don't advocate that kind of fishing ever on this channel, so I will just make that very clear on why I am targeting fish the way I am on these episodes. Yes, I will acknowledge that by using roe, I will occasionally hook a salmon on accident, but I can mitigate the hooking of salmon by simply using a shorter leader and not having a weight that will attach it so close to the bottom where the salmon will get flossed. This evening I've noticed that there was quite a bit of salmon sitting beneath these riffles. I am targeting the top of these riffles because the steelhead will be situated on these top upper portion versus the salmon, which will sit below in the holes. The salmon are holding in the holes until the evening time to run up these riffles, therefore most of the steelhead will be sitting on top because the salmon are extremely territorial and will actually push the steelhead out of the holes. This is a very nice fall run steelhead for this particular river. I find that most fall run fish in this river will be a lot smaller than their winter cousins. The average fall run fish will vary between 1 to 5 pounds, whereas their winter cousins will vary between 5 to 9 to 12 pounds maybe. This fish is really nice. I find that the biggest advantage roe have over any other form of fishing, particularly for fall run steelhead, is the fact that the angler can make a whole lot of mistake and still end up hooking a nice steelhead. Oftentimes with roe, for beginners, I find that beginners can often hook great numbers and good numbers of fish fishing with roe. This river doesn't have any bait restriction unlike those up in the north like some of the rivers in Washington and Oregon, so bait fishing is very productive for the anglers that don't want to toss hardwares or artificials and flies all day. This is a very nice wild fish. I know this is a wild fish because of the adipose fin, so I will show him to you guys real quick and I'll get him back in the water and release safely. On this river, 2 hatchery fish may be kept per day, but with these wild fish they must be returned immediately to the water. I'll let him rest up a bit in the net in the flowing water before letting him go. As soon as he begins to swim strong, I'll slowly release him back into the faster flowing water. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. As for the gear I'm using a very light set of gear. I'm using a spinning rod armed with 6-pound mono and a 5-pound fluorocarbon leader with a very small swivel just to prevent line twists from fishing in the rough waters of the riffles. I find that by even using ultralight trout gear, an angler can fish for these fish quite successfully because they will be on the lot smaller side unlike their winter cousins. As for the technique itself, all I am doing is giving the roe a cast upstream at a 45-degree angle and letting it sweep gently downstream. I will lift the rod tip up every once here and there when I feel the roe make contact with the bottom. The reason I do this is to prevent the roe from hanging up or the hook from rolling into the crevices of these shallow cobblestone waters. With the cobblestone, if you were to let the roe continue bouncing without lifting every here and there, the roe will eventually hang up, and thus you will not hook many fish. As for the bite will often be very subtle, more times than not with it just gently shaking almost like a sponge. That is when you should set the hook. And when unsure, just set the hook anyways. Hook sets are free, but the fish are not. One key important factor is also to mend the line and keep it straight. This fish struck, and because I mended the line and kept it straight and followed it with my rod tip, I'm able to detect even the subtlest of bite. This fish actually struck the bait and just continued sitting there. This is a very nice fall run fish. I know this is a steelhead and not a salmon because he is shaking violently and he is starting to try and perform jumps. I'm going to keep the rod tip high, and I'm also going to try to pin him as tight as I can and walk him down with the flow of the water. I will not fight the fish upstream because by doing so I will end up bending out the hook and I will probably lose him. When possible, I will walk the fish down to calmer waters and I will land the fish from there. So overall, for those anglers out there that are wondering how I target these fall run fish, particularly if I don't have to target them with hardware flies or plugs, I will actually target them with roe. Just to make the position clear on what I prefer to target fall run steelhead with, if regulations are not in effect and a salmon season were open, I actually would be targeting salmon over steelhead. But with the salmon closure, I will opt for steelhead, despite the steelhead being less in numbers than the salmon. Roe fishing is a great way to target numbers of steelhead and quality steelhead as well. Contrary to popular belief, roe fishing had been around for a very long time and will continue to take salmon and steelhead in waters where it is not restricted or completely banned. Whenever I'm given the options to fish fresh bait such as roe or to fish artificial, where the restrictions don't limit the roe fishing, I will always opt to fish for roe, particularly for salmon and steelhead. I get it, a lot of guys don't like getting their hands dirty throwing bait for salmon and steelhead, but I particularly don't mind which way I catch them, particularly if the regulations don't restrict it. The sun will be setting soon, so I will land this fish and fish for an hour or so before leaving. I particularly don't like fishing as the sun set because the salmon will begin to run up this riffle and I don't want to hook into any salmon. The fish is approaching me quick, and I see now that this is a very jumbo wild steelhead. This wild steelhead is very fat for this section of river. Particularly, I don't get many wild fish looking like this in the fall. Most of the fish in this river system will tend to be hatchery fishes, so to land 2 wild fish in a day is quite a treat for me. An angler can tell the difference between a wild fish and a hatchery fish because the wild fish will have this giant adipose fin, whereas a hatchery fish will have this little adipose fin clipped off completely, indicating that the angler can retain the fish. With the barbless hook, I'm able to just quickly pop the hook out immediately. This is a beautiful wild fish for the fall. This fish is full fin and not a scale out of place. I am ecstatic that I managed to catch 2 wild fish today, whereas most of the time, these fall fish will tend to be hatchery fishes. Thanks for playing, dude. Rest up a bit and off you go, buddy. Overall, it was a great evening on my local river. I managed to hook into 2 nice wild fall run steelhead with roe. So I hope that this episode demonstrates that roe fishing can be incredibly effective this time of year for fall run steelhead. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.